The mountains of Afghanistan were silent until all hell broke loose. SEAL Team 2, America's elite warriors, had moved under cover of night to watch a Taliban compound, but instead of observing, they found themselves hunted. Enemy fighters surged from 3 directions, cutting off every escape. Gunfire echoed through the valley, bullets slammed into rock, and the SEALs realized the bitter truth. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and surrounded. Retreat was the only option until one man refused to give up. A U.S. Air Force combat controller, pinned down alongside them, spotted the enemy snipers controlling the battlefield. With air support grounded and the team minutes from annihilation, he picked up an M24 sniper rifle. 3 shots, 3 kills. And in less than a minute, he turned a desperate retreat into an unforgettable victory. This is the story of how one trigger pull changed everything. The Afghan mountains were brutal. Black stone ridges slicing the sky, freezing winds clawing at every exposed inch of skin. For SEAL Team 2, it was just another battlefield. For Emily Johnson, it was another test, one she knew would begin long before the first shot was fired. She was the only woman in the unit, an Air Force combat controller attached to the team for this operation. Her rucksack was heavier than most, packed with radios, satellite gear, and targeting systems. But weight wasn't the only burden she carried. She could feel the unspoken tension every time the SEALs glanced her way. "Keep up, controller," one muttered as they scrambled up the rocks. "This isn't an Air Force classroom. Don't slow us down." The words stung, not because she hadn't heard them before, but because they came from men she would soon have to trust with her life. To them, she wasn't a SEAL. She wasn't one of them. She was an outsider with a different patch, a liability in terrain where weakness was unforgivable. Emily stayed silent, adjusting her grip on the jagged stone, her boots finding purchase in the thin mountain air. She had learned long ago that answering back proved nothing. The only proof these men respected came in the form of action, on the battlefield, when it mattered most. By the time they reached the Overwatch Ridge, sweat had frozen against her neck. The valley spread out below them like a dark ocean. A Taliban compound glowing faintly in the distance. The SEALs set up optics, scanning rooftops and pathways. Emily unfolded her communications gear, the lifeline that could call in fire from the sky if things went wrong. "Just stay on the radio," another voice murmured near her. "Leave the fighting to us." Emily didn't look up. She calibrated frequencies, checked encryption, confirmed signals. Every detail was muscle memory. Every action a reminder that she had earned. This role through training that had broken stronger people than these men. They didn't have to believe in her, not yet. The night was calm for now, the compound quiet. But Emily knew better than to trust silence in Afghanistan. Somewhere in the darkness, danger was already moving. And when it struck, the same men doubting her tonight would have no choice but to depend on her. The first hour passed in uneasy silence. The compound below glowed faintly, sporadic lanterns, the faint outlines of men moving inside the walls, and the occasional flicker of a cigarette ember against the black night. The SEALs whispered to each other through tight comms discipline, noting patterns of movement, logging times, mapping out routes. It was textbook surveillance. Emily sat in the center of it all, headphones pressed to her ears, radios alive with faint static. Her world was signals and frequencies, invisible threads tying their small team to distant command posts and aircraft loitering hundreds of miles away. She tracked every voice, every update, her fingers adjusting dials with instinctive precision. To the SEALs, it looked like busy work. To her, it was survival. A rustle of movement on the flank broke the rhythm. Petty Officer Martinez, the point man, stiffened behind his rifle. Movement. Northern Ridge Line. Multiple figures. The words tightened the air instantly. The SEALs froze, optics swinging to the dark slope. Through her own scope, Emily picked out faint silhouettes against the starlight, men advancing low, disciplined, deliberate, not shepherds, not wanderers, fighters. "Contact?" Lieutenant Patterson whispered. "Not yet," Martinez answered. "But they're spreading out. 3 groups, coordinated." Emily's stomach clenched. That wasn't chance. That was a net being drawn around them. She leaned over her radio, keying into higher headquarters. "Overwatch team has possible compromise. Multiple hostiles maneuvering on our position. Request immediate QRF standby." One of the SEALs muttered under his breath, just loud enough for her to hear. Maybe they picked up her chatter. The jab was sharp, unfair, and it burned. But Emily forced her voice steady. "They're closing from 3 directions. This isn't random movement. They know we're here." Patterson scanned through his optics again, his jaw tightening. The pattern was unmistakable, fighters moving, deliberately to choke off escape routes. Whoever commanded them knew how to box in special operators. This was no mob with rifles. This was a trap. Lock it down. Everyone stay sharp, he ordered. His tone carried calm, but his eyes betrayed something else. Concern. Emily's fingers danced across her comms. She pushed updates to command, alerted the nearest gunships, and lined up extraction birds. But the responses came back cold. Weather-grounding rotary assets, missile threats in the valley. Earliest support, 30 minutes. 30 minutes they didn't have. The night was no longer quiet. It was closing in fast. The first shot cracked the night open like glass. A muzzle flash sparked from the northern ridge, followed instantly by the hiss of a round slamming into stone inches from Martinez's scope. Then the valley erupted. Automatic fire poured down in streams of red tracers, carving the darkness, chewing rock into sparks. Contact! North ridge, east flank, heavy, Patterson barked. The SEALs dropped low, rifles snapping to life. Controlled bursts cutting back into the night. Emily flattened against the rocks, her headset exploding with noise, team comms, command channels, enemy fire all colliding at once. She forced herself calm, tuning frequencies, filtering chaos into clarity. Her fingers swept over the targeting laser, marking ridgelines for the aircraft still circling far outside the valley. Support was inbound, but minutes felt like lifetimes. Suppressing fire, move! Martinez shouted. Two SEALs shifted to higher cover, their rifles hammering, muzzle flashes lighting their grim faces. But the enemy wasn't just attacking from the ridge, they were below too. Shapes moved in the valley, climbing fast, spraying upward fire to pin them in place. A round snapped past Emily's cheek so close it stung her skin. She hugged the ground, breath steadying. This wasn't training. This was survival. God damn it, they're everywhere, one SEAL cursed. They had to have known we were coming. Patterson's voice was low but sharp. Hold the line. We ride this out until air comes online. Emily scanned through her scope. She counted at least 30 hostiles. Maybe more, their maneuvers disciplined, pushing closer. This wasn't random militia fire. This was coordinated, tactical, and merciless. We don't have 30 minutes, Emily said, her voice cutting into the team net. No one answered. Bullets screamed overhead. Grenades cracked in the valley below, thunder rolling up the slopes. Dust choked the ridge. Emily's radio pinged, confirmation from command. Gunships were grounded, strike fighters rerouted. The earliest support window had slipped even further. Her stomach knotted. They were on their own. The SEALs braced harder, rifles glowing hot. But every man knew it. They were being pushed into a corner. Emily's eyes shifted back to her gear, the laser, the scope, the frequencies. If the skies wouldn't save them, maybe her hands still could. She just had to make them believe it. And for that, she'd need to do more than talk. She'd need to act. The ridge shook under the thunder of gunfire. Brass casings scattered across the rocks, glowing faint in the moonlight. The SEALs were holding, but barely, pinned by heavy machine gun fire from the northern slope. Every time one tried to shift position, a curtain of tracers forced him back down. We're boxed in, Martinez yelled. We can't push out. Emily's eyes darted across the chaos. Her headset screamed with overlapping transmissions, HQ demanding updates, aircraft diverting, coordinates being recalculated. But none of that mattered. The fight wasn't in the sky anymore. It was here, on this ridge, and the team was seconds from being overrun. Her gaze fell on the M24 sniper rifle lying against the rocks. Its owner, Chief Brooks, was bleeding from a shrapnel cut across his shoulder, his firing arm sluggish. He cursed under his breath, trying to steady the weapon but losing strength with every shot. Without thinking, Emily slid toward him. Let me take it. Brooks snapped his head around, his face hard. This isn't a toy. Stay on the radio. Another burst chewed into their cover, stone splinters stinging her cheek. Emily's jaw clenched. She grabbed the rifle, pulling it tight against her, shoulder with the familiarity of 1,000 hours on the range. Her voice was calm but sharp enough to cut through the fire. Either I take the shot or we're done here. Patterson's eyes met hers. For a split second, doubt burned there, then something else. Calculation. He gave the smallest nod. Do it. Emily settled behind the scope, her breath steadying, her world narrowing to the glass circle in front of her. Through it, the chaos sharpened into precision. She tracked the muzzle flashes ripping from the northern ridge, a PKM machine gun on a tripod, its operator stitching the ridge with fire. She exhaled, squeezed. The crack of the rifle cut through the storm. The gunner collapsed. The heavy fire staggered, then stilled. "Jesus," one SEAL muttered, eyes flicking to her. Emily didn't look up. She was already adjusting, shifting, tracking the next target. Another hostile pushing forward, 1 round down. Another climbing the slope, round 2 down. 3 shots, 3 kills. The ridge quieted just enough for the SEALs to move, their rifles roaring again with renewed purpose. For the first time that night, Emily felt the weight in their stares wasn't doubt. It was respect, tinged with surprise. And the fight had only just begun. Emily didn't answer. Her focus was locked, her scope dancing target to target. Every pull of the trigger was another body tumbling into the dirt. Another heartbeat stolen back for the team. But her mind raced. She knew they couldn't hold like this forever. Ammo was finite. The enemy numbers weren't. "Patterson!" she called between shots. "They're pressing from 3 angles. They'll box us in completely." The lieutenant cursed under his breath, ducking as a bullet snapped past. "Extraction's still 20 out. We dig in, hold this line, or we die here." Emily's jaw tightened. She swept her scope again, scanning for something, anything, that could shift the fight. And then she saw him. A figure on the valley floor, just beyond the compound, shouting orders, waving fighters forward. The way the others moved around him, the way they reacted, it was clear. The commander. Emily's finger hovered over the trigger, breath slowing. One shot here could change everything. But missing could mean the end. Emily's scope framed the commander like a ghost in the chaos. He stood taller than the others. His silhouette illuminated by the faint glow of lanterns spilling from the compound. Every movement confirmed his authority. Fighters responded, instantly to his hand signals, adjusting positions with disciplined precision. He wasn't just another gunman. He was the spine of this attack. Her finger rested on the trigger, but her pulse betrayed her, fast, sharp, hammering in her ears louder than the gunfire. The valley swarmed with fighters, their muzzle flashes strobing across the night. Hitting him meant threading a bullet through chaos, distance, and wind. Missing meant the enemy kept pressing, harder, closer. "Talk to me, Johnson," Patterson's voice crackled in her headset. "What do you see?" Emily's lips were dry. She kept her eye locked through the glass. Their leader, center of the valley. "If I drop him, they fold." There was a pause, then his reply, steady, measured. "Then make it count." Rounds cracked over her head, chewing into the rock. She forced her breathing slow, tuning out the chaos around her. In her mind, the battlefield dimmed. It wasn't the roar of automatic fire she heard anymore. It was the rhythm of her heartbeat syncing with her breath. In steady outhold, her crosshairs steadied on the commander's chest. He barked another order, and more fighters surged forward, pushing dangerously close to the ridge. A SEAL to her right screamed, "We're getting overrun!" Emily blocked it out. She didn't have the luxury of panic. She shifted slightly, accounting for the crosswind that tugged at her shot. A single correction. A single chance. Her finger squeezed. The rifle cracked, its recoil slamming into her shoulder. Through the scope, she watched the commander stagger, then collapse into the dirt motionless. For a split second, the valley froze. Fighters hesitated, eyes flicking toward their fallen leader. The rhythm of their attack faltered. The relentless surge slowed, confusion rippling through their ranks. A stunned silence fell over the ridge. Even the SEALs glanced at her, their expressions a mix of shock and something heavier. Belief. Emily pulled back from the scope, her voice calm, almost defiant. "He's down." But she knew better than to think it was over. Killing the leader had bought them time. Now the real fight to survive would begin. For a heartbeat, silence ruled the valley. The commander lay motionless in the dirt, his outstretched hand frozen mid-command. The fighters who had followed his every gesture now faltered, their formation breaking apart. Hope surged on the ridge. Maybe, just maybe, they could hold until extraction. But hope lasted only seconds. A cry rose from the valley floor, guttural and furious. One fighter snatched up the fallen commander's rifle, thrust it into the air, and bellowed words that echoed like a war drum. The hesitation vanished. Fury replaced discipline. The enemy charged, not cautious, not tactical, just relentless, like a wave crashing against rock. "Here they come!" Martinez shouted, hurling a fresh magazine into his rifle. The night exploded. Tracers carved red lines upward. RPGs shrieked through the air, and grenades thudded into the dirt with teeth-rattling blasts. Dust engulfed the ridge, choking lungs and stinging eyes. The SEALs fired back with everything they had, muzzles flashing non-stop. But the enemy kept climbing, clawing, screaming, closing the gap inch by inch. Emily stayed low, steady behind the M24. Her scope cutting through smoke and fire. She dropped one, then another. Her movements mechanical. Precise, but the swarm didn't thin fast enough. For every body that fell, two more appeared from the darkness. A rocket slammed into the ridge wall, showering them with stone and dirt. Brooks cursed, dragging his wounded arm tight against his chest. Patterson barked orders through the chaos, his voice hoarse but unbroken. Hold this line. Nobody breaks. Nobody falls. But Emily could see the truth through her scope. The enemy wasn't retreating this time. They weren't regrouping. They were going to spend every fighter they had to overrun the ridge before extraction could arrive. One SEAL staggered, nearly thrown from cover by the concussion of a blast. Emily pulled him back, shoved the M24 against her shoulder again, and fired through the smoke. Her hands were numb, her ears ringing, but she refused to stop. Every shot she took wasn't just defense, it was defiance. And as the enemy wave pressed closer, only one thought cut through the chaos. If she couldn't break them here, no one would survive long enough to see dawn. The ridge was collapsing into chaos. The enemy wave, drunk with rage, was climbing higher, their war cries mixing with the thunder of rifles. The SEALs fought like men possessed, but their line was thinning. Brooks was down to his sidearm. Martinez bled from a gash across his forehead, and even Patterson's voice cracked from strain. Emily's scope tracked target after target, but her ammo was dwindling. The M24's magazine clacked empty. She rammed in her last, her breath ragged. 7 rounds left, 7 chances. Through the smoke, she saw the shift. The enemy wasn't just charging anymore, they were flanking, circling to climb the eastern slope. If they reached the ridge from behind, it was over. No cover, no second chance. "Lieutenant!" she shouted over the roar. "They're moving around. They'll hit us from the east!" Patterson swore, his rifle spitting fire. "We can't split. We don't have the men." Emily's stomach twisted. She knew he was right. The SEALs were stretched to breaking. If someone didn't cut off that flank, they'd all be swallowed. She looked at the M24 in her hands, then at the shadowy slope crawling with fighters, and she made the choice. Without waiting for permission, Emily broke from cover. She sprinted along the ridge, ducking blasts of dirt and stone, the M24 slamming against her chest with every stride. Shouts rang out behind her, Patterson's voice. Martinez's curse, but she didn't stop. She slid into a new position, barely shielded by a jagged outcrop, and threw herself flat. The eastern slope opened before her, a dozen fighters scaling the rocks, their rifles glinting in the firelight. Her hands were steady now, her mind clear. First shot, 1 down. Second shot, 2. She worked the bolt fast, each round cracking like thunder, each kill slowing the rush. But they kept climbing, closer, closer. 4 rounds left. A fighter raised his rifle, leveling at her. Emily fired first. He crumpled, sliding back down the rocks. 3 left. She pushed past the ache in her shoulder, the ringing in her ears. Her body was breaking, but her will wasn't. This was no longer about proving herself. It was survival. For her, for them, for the team that once doubted her. And as she chambered her final rounds, Emily knew one truth. If this was her last stand, she was going to make it count. Emily's last 3 shots echoed like a drumbeat across the valley. Each pull of the trigger dropped another fighter clawing for the ridge. The last round slammed into the chest of the final climber, sending him tumbling back into the darkness below. Then silence, deafening, absolute. Smoke drifted through the broken night. The ridge was scarred, littered with spent casings, blood and shattered stone. For a long moment, no one moved. The SEALs, battered and exhausted, stared down into the valley. The once relentless swarm of fighters had dissolved into scattered shadows, leaderless, broken, unwilling to climb again. Emily lay flat against the dirt, chest heaving, the M24 slack in her hands. Her arms trembled, her ears rang. But her eyes stayed fixed on the slope she'd just defended alone. She had given everything, every ounce of skill, every ounce of willpower to hold the line. A heavy hand gripped her shoulder. She looked up into Patterson's face. His helmet was cracked, his eyes rimmed red from smoke, but his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. "You saved us," he said simply. Around them, the SEALs nodded. No more doubt, no more sneers. The same men who had once questioned her place on the ridge now looked at her with something else. Respect, hard-earned, unshakable. Minutes later, the thump of rotor blades rolled across the valley. Extraction had arrived. The SEALs gathered their wounded, shouldered their gear, and prepared to leave the shattered ridge behind. Emily stood last, the M24 hanging at her side. As the helicopter lifted them into the bruised dawn sky, Emily looked down at the battlefield. The valley below was quiet now, but she knew its silence carried weight. A place where she had been doubted, tested, and nearly broken, but where she had risen, stronger than anyone imagined. And for the first time, she didn't just feel like a soldier among SEALs. She felt like one of them. Stories like Emily's remind us that courage isn't about size, rank, or reputation. It's about the choices you make when everything is on the line. If this story gripped you, make sure to like this video, share it with someone who needs inspiration, and subscribe for more untold battles that prove true strength comes from within.